for a century, I think the definition of a great car was just, well, something you could really hear and feel.
Oh, yeah, like the roar of a V8 engine.
Exactly. Or that heavy, satisfying thud of a German-engineered door closing, right? It was pure, tangible, mechanical perfection.
You were essentially buying this finely tuned, independent piece of machinery.
But if you look at the global automotive industry today, that heavy door thud is really starting to sound a bit like a death knell.
It really is.
So today on our deep dive, we are unpacking the existential crisis and the technological revolution reshaping the whole industry. We're pulling from engineering reports from Tiresi, some strategic data from Computer, and geopolitical analysis from Unheard to figure out why these century-old European titans are just stumbling right now.
Because the very concept of what a car is, it's fundamentally changing. We're moving so rapidly away from mechanical engineering as the core value.
Right.
And we're going straight into the era of the software-defined vehicle. I mean, a modern car now contains over 100 million lines of code.
Wait, 100 million? That is insane.
Yeah, it's actually more software architecture than you will find in a modern fighter jet.
Wow. Okay, well, that definitely explains the cultural shift happening in China right now. Because Chinese youth are actively rejecting legacy German and American vehicles. They're actually calling them auto boomer, like, parents' brands.
Right, they do not want traditional luxury anymore. They just want a smartphone on wheels.
Which really reminds me of the whole flip phone industry right before the smartphone took over. I mean, are European automakers basically having a Nokia moment right now?
That is a perfect analogy. Companies like Xiaomi completely understand this shift, which is why smartphone manufacturers are suddenly releasing high-performance electric vehicles.
Because they aren't burdened by a century of mechanical heritage.
Exactly. They just build a digital ecosystem that, happens to have wheels.
So if software is the new engine, what happens to that massive European infrastructure that was built exclusively to cast metal and assemble gears?
Well, it's a crisis. I mean, we are seeing places like Turin's historic Mirafiori plant, which used to pump out 1 million cars a year, and now they, quote-unquote, reopen sometimes.
Oh, wow. And Volkswagen is closing German factories and cutting wages, right?
Yeah.
Breaching agreements they've held since 1994.
Yeah, and according to the geopolitical analysis in Unheard, this structural collapse is really the result of Europe's net zero policies. Specifically, that 2035 ban on combustion engines colliding with existing global supply chains.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because, weren't those green mandates intended to reindustrialize Europe? Like, the goal was to force local innovation and create manufacturing dominance, not gut the whole industry. Why did European policymakers miscalculate that trap so badly?
Well, simply put, they legislated the demand before securing the supply. By mandating this incredibly rapid pivot to EVs, Europe inadvertently played right into China's dual circulation strategy.
Right, which is that economic model where China stimulates massive domestic consumption while simultaneously locking down international supply chains.
Exactly. They spent years aggressively monopolizing the processing of raw battery metals, and they powered that heavy industrial expansion with really cheap energy.
With about 60% of their electricity coming from coal, right?
Right. So they built the foundation while Europe was still debating the blueprints. By the time Europe mandated EVs, China was uniquely positioned to actually supply the underlying technology affordably.
Which I guess forces European manufacturers into a really radical survival strategy to survive this squeeze. Co-opetition.
Yeah, co-opetition. Direct competitors are forming joint ventures simply because the R&D costs to catch up are just too massive for any single company to shoulder alone.
Right, they have to pool resources to figure out things like CATL's new battery tech.
Yeah.
Our sources show CATL batteries hitting an 80% charge in under 4 minutes.
Which is wild, and to achieve that, you really have to master thermal runaway.
Right, managing the immense heat generated by shoving that much electricity into a cell that quickly without it, catching fire.
Exactly. Or just look at the Zeekr 8X.
Oh, the Zeekr is fascinating.
It really is. It uses predictive sensor arrays to process environmental data in milliseconds. It actually raises its suspension right before an impact to shift the crash force to the strongest part of the chassis.
But to build that kind of reflexive instant response system, you need serious computing power.
You do.
And that is where European research centers are pooling resources into initiatives like the Envelope project, testing 5G and 6G autonomous driving.
Right, because Envelope relies on low-latency edge computing. So instead of a car sending data all the way to some distant server to decide when to brake, The computation happens right there at the edge of the network.
Like on the car itself or at a nearby 5G cell tower.
Exactly. This allows cars to become active nodes in a smart city, instantly communicating with traffic lights and other vehicles to prevent accidents.
So the next vehicle you buy won't just be transportation. It's going to be a digital hub that monitors your biometrics, analyzes traffic in real time, and, updates its operating system while you sleep.
It is a total paradigm shift.
It really is. But that brings us back to that heavy thudding door of the past and that feeling of total mechanical independence. So here's a thought to leave you with. When cars become interoperable service providers, constantly exchanging your location and biological data with the smart city around them, who ultimately controls your mobility?
A really critical question for the road ahead.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn with us today.